Welcome in, Josh. Nice to have you aboard.
Nice to be with you, Tim.
Tell us, with Holden, how badly does the government want to keep vehicle manufacturing in this country?
We absolutely want to keep vehicle manufacturing in this country, and we want Holden to not only survive but to prosper. We've been very critical of the way the then Labor government dealt with the car industry, particularly the carbon tax, which has driven up the cost of each domestically manufactured vehicle up to $400. You know, the minute to midnight policy announcement by Kevin Rudd about a $1.8 billion tax slug by changing the FBT on the car industry. We've seen commitments by Labor that were never delivered. I mean, we do remember Julia Gillard, when Prime Minister, going down to the Ford plant in Geelong and announcing $34 million to create 300 new jobs. Well, within 8 months later, 300 jobs were actually cut, not created. So we want to see the car industry survive, and we have committed $1 billion to 2015 for the Automotive Transformation Scheme.
Okay, but look at the headlines this morning. Hockey dares GM to leave. Hockey to Holden. Put up or pack up. That does not sound like a government treating a fragile industry with care.
I think the message is we want some clarity from Holden as to their long-term intentions for Australia. You know, the workers want that, the industry wants that, and certainly the government wants that. So that is the message to Holden, to let us know what their intentions are.
A pre-Christmas demand to make up your mind?
Well, there's just a lot of uncertainty, and as you could expect, that is creating unnecessary difficulties for the sector and for the workers. So we want to know what is Holden's intentions.
What about the view that the Abbott government has seen the cost to the taxpayer of keeping this industry alive and has decided, hey, look, it's better gone. Our budget will be in better shape if we're not forking out these hundreds of millions of dollars year after year?
Well, as I said, Tim, there is a $1 billion commitment over the years to 2015 for the Automotive Transformation Scheme. But it's not a blank cheque, and any taxpayer would expect that the government does not provide any industry with a blank cheque. I've said previously the taxpayer is not an ATM for the car industry, and that's only reasonable and prudent.
So there needs to be a limit, and Holden needs to know that it can't go beyond that, Holden or Toyota.
There are certainly limits, absolutely, when you're talking about taxpayers' funds, particularly in this frugal economic climate.
If you are so determined to keep the vehicle makers in this country, why was $500 million taken out of the assistance package by this government compared to what Labor had on the table?
Well, if you want to know about our determination to help the car industry, it's about abolishing the carbon tax, which is worth much more than $500 million to the car industry. I mean, you're talking about an extra $400, Tim, to the price of every domestically manufactured car. And when you're competing against imports who are not subject to the carbon tax, you are putting Australian industry and Australian workers at a competitive disadvantage.
Okay, you represent people in the good city of Melbourne who care very dearly about this industry. You also represent the Prime Minister and the government as you speak to us now. Do you feel a little bit torn?
No, but I want to get the best outcome not only for the car industry but for the taxpayers and for the country. And I think the best outcome is for the car industry to survive, but at the same time we also want to reduce costs in the car industry, and as I said, the abolition of the carbon tax, which was voted on by the Australian people just a few months ago, has passed the House, has been held up by the Labor Party and the Greens in the Senate, should be passed, and that flow-on effect will be a net positive for the car industry.
Do you get a sense that this decision, the die might already have been cast on this in Detroit, that the decision has been made by the parent?
I am not aware of what the decision-making process is in Detroit, so I do not know where Holden's thinking is at the moment.
This is a classic economic wet versus dry argument, isn't it? The economic dries say, get out of the way and let the economy make its decisions and don't spend taxpayers' money at this kind of level to alter the economic outcome. And the wets say, lots of jobs here, lots of welfare, the welfare of Australians matters, we've got to interrupt. That is a classic divide for your party and your government.
Nice try, Tim, but that's actually not how I would see it in terms of ideology. I'd see it as what will produce the best outcome for Australia, and the best outcome for Australia is to ensure that the car industry does survive, but that we can reduce the costs of their manufacturing in Australia. And one of the ways to do that is to get rid of the carbon tax. I keep coming back to that because a $400 additional impost on manufacturing a car in Australia does put our manufacturers at a competitive disadvantage when they're competing in the international marketplace.
Is Holden playing hardball? They playing tough negotiations here? Let's see what juice we can squeeze out of the taxpayer on this one.
Well, I'm sure they're batting for their own side, and you'd understand that with a company. We're batting for the Australian taxpayer and for the economy as a whole.
How close, or are we at the limits of what the taxpayer will give the vehicle industry now?
Well,
are we there?
Well, I think the Prime Minister's made very clear the government's position, which is there is a $1 billion there in terms of the automotive transformation scheme. We want to reduce costs. Well, he has said that's what's on the table, and we hope that Holden can stay and continue to employ Australians.
Debt. We'll know a lot more when we see the mid-year economic outlook next week.
Yeah.
The Treasury will present it. $500 billion. Could Australia's debt reach that in the next few years?
Look, I hope not, because, as I've said previously, debt is intergenerational theft, because what you are doing is burdening the next generation with interest bills. In this case, already nearly $10 billion per annum. That's 10 teaching hospitals around Australia every year being built. That's major road projects like the East-West Link. That is just the interest bill, Tim, on the debt that Labor left the government. So we had to seek an increase in the debt ceiling. We couldn't get that from the Labor Party, and we're going to abolish the debt ceiling with the help of the Greens. And, at the end of the day, we're about cutting spending, but we're also about strengthening the economy. And if we can reduce the overall tax burden, if we can decrease the regulatory burden, if we can free up the labour market, then we can grow the economy, build back the tax base, and hopefully get the budget back into surplus.
$500 billion. Nobody's denying that debt is going there this morning, I gather.
Well, no one has a crystal ball either, so we don't know where it's going over time, other than what Joe Hockey has said rightly today, which is that the economic conditions around the world are very tough, that it was prudent to provide Australia with this flexibility around the debt ceiling, and now with the abolition of the debt ceiling, but it's Labor's debt, Tim. This is Labor's debt. We actually left them a pristine balance sheet with zero, I can say that again, a big fat zero government debt, more than $50 billion in the bank, and we've been left with $300 billion of debt and growing.
There's a classical political game going on here, though, isn't there?
Not really.
Every time we change government, understandably, the political incentive on the new government is to lay as much as bad as it can, adverse economic numbers at the feet of the previous government.
But Kevin Rudd couldn't do that, Tim, because we left him zero government debt and $50 billion in the bank, and that's why Australia was able to get through the global financial crisis. But because of Labor's wasteful spending, and recently, look at the mining tax. They said it was going to produce billions of dollars of revenue. It's produced only a few $100 million, but there's $10 billion plus worth of spending measures. That is, saddling the next government, in our case, our government, with increased expenditure that Australia can't afford.
Josh Frydenberg, to close, your choice of speaker, Bronwyn Bishop, stands accused this morning by Labor of being utterly partisan in the way she handled debate last night in the House, and I think in some other circumstances, according to Labor, that she actually joined the sledging. How fair is Labor's assessment of Bronwyn Bishop's speakership?
Oh, it's completely wrong. I mean, what they don't like, the Labor Party, is that they're actually in opposition, and that will take some adjustment because they had been in government for nearly 6 years, and they're still acclimatising to the fact. They had that bitter struggle for the leadership where Anthony Albanese, who won the popular vote among the Labor membership, finds himself no longer the leader of the, in this case, the opposition business in the House. He was the He was the bridesmaid to Bill Shorten for the leadership. So it's a bit of an unsettled bunch there. They've got 55 seats in the House. We've got 90 seats. So that climate has left them a bit, I think, a bit bruised. And Bronwyn Bishop, as she was a minister, as she was a member of the government previously, she is a firm character. She's a principled character, she's a good speaker, and I think it's just sour grapes from the Labor Party.
How well's she doing though?
Very well. Very
Objective?
well. Absolutely. Absolutely. What has she done wrong?
Sledging, apparently, according to Labor.
Well, I think they've been watching too much cricket, the Labor Party, because, you know, that's what has been going on in the Ashes series. It's not going on in the House of Representatives.
Josh Frydenberg, as always, we're delighted to have you in the Breaking Politics studio.
Well, Merry Christmas to you and season's greetings to all your viewers.
Merry Christmas.
Thanks, Tim.